So you've captured the critical hypotheses underlying your business model, and you've done that with a business model canvas. Next step is to go through and test all of those hypotheses to see where you're right and where you might need to do some adjustments. Hi, I'm Steve Morris, and I use this Startup SOS channel to provide practical how-to advice for first-time entrepreneurs. In previous videos, we've gone through how to fill out your canvas. Today, we're going to focus on how to test those hypotheses. In later videos, I'll go into a lot more pragmatic detail for a couple of the segments of the canvas that are especially challenging. So we will have some follow-on videos, which means this is not a bad time to click the subscribe button if you haven't done that yet, and click that notification bell so you won't miss those follow-on videos. Why are you going to test the hypotheses underlying your canvas? Well, because it's better to figure out early if some of those hypotheses are not true. You can save yourself a lot of time and hassle by not developing the wrong product if you go test things first. And if there's some things where you were wrong, you can make some adjustments early on. Okay, great. So how exactly do you do that? How do you test those hypotheses? It really comes down to getting out of the building, as Steve Blank would say, and talking to people. So who exactly are you talking to? Well, first of all, prospective customers. As you'll see, they come up in a number of sections of the canvas. But there are other experts that you'll want to be talking to also. And again, different folks depending on the different sections. So let's start on the right with customer segments and walk through the canvas section by section. You recall from our previous videos on how to fill out the business model canvas, the customer segment is the first critical thing that you have to decide on in looking at your business model strategy, because different customer segments can have different value propositions, and the whole rest of the canvas can certainly be different as a result. So the advice is always to pick one, or at least pick a really short list, maybe a couple, to go test. If you pick too many, you're going to be spending all your time testing different models, and the risk is you'll never get done. So you pick one, but the real testing then that happens isn't so much testing the customer segment, it's testing the value proposition for that customer segment. And frankly, if the value proposition doesn't pan out, you might want to back up and ask yourself, is there a customer segment that would be a better choice, that has a more compelling problem that we can solve? And then you redo the value proposition and go test out. Okay, so let's assume you've chosen your customer segment. Let's move to step 2, which is testing the value proposition. So testing every segment of the canvas is important, but I would say that the value proposition is probably the single most important segment to test, because it really addresses the question of, if you build it, will they buy it? Now you need to make sure that you can build it at a cost that's acceptable given how much you can sell it for. But still, if you're not solving a compelling problem, there's not a business there. And remember, there are a number of things that you're validating, a number of hypotheses underlying the value proposition. What's the job to be done? What's the pain the customer is trying to avoid? What's the gain they want to reach through using this kind of a product? You're assuming in a hypothesis that they're unhappy with the current solutions, and you believe, another hypothesis, that your solution is better than the solutions that are available. All those things need to be tested. And the way you test those is to go out and talk to prospective customers in an interview, preferably an in-person interview, because what you're really trying to do is kind of get inside the head of these prospective customers and really understand how they think about this. Do you really understand correctly the job to be done, what the pain is to be avoided, what the gain is they want to obtain? Do you really understand why they don't like the current solutions that are out there? It's good to assume that you don't understand that right, which is why you can't do this as a simple list of questions that you post on the internet. You're sort of assuming here that you might not understand all the questions to ask. So you want to do probing interviews, and that's why you're going to do them in person, preferably physically in the same room, or at least maybe over a video call would be the second best approach. Because you're really trying to watch for body language and really understand where the emotion is, what really makes this need important, or frankly, is it even important at all? So in person is the way to do it. Again, in a later video, we'll jump into the detail of just how do you conduct one of these interviews. Let's move now to the customer relationship. So you'll recall that in customer relationship, you're really trying to understand, how does the customer want to buy? What sort of a buying experience do they want? And what kind of a post-buy support experience do they want? Your long-term goal in customer relationship is to have happy enough customers that they give you testimonials and give you referrals to new customers. So that involves, of course, a lot of questions, which, not surprisingly, are going to come back to the customer interview. You'll be asking questions about how they'd like to buy, how they'd like to be supported after the buy, and in general, just sort of understand how they'd like that whole relationship process to work between you and them in the vendor-customer relationship. Next would come channels. And these would be, of course, both the marketing channels and the selling channels you're going to use in this business. How do you test your hypotheses there? It starts with customer interviews, because you'll want to understand, for the marketing questions, how do these prospective customers learn about solutions in this particular market? Those are the marketing channels you'll want to use. But at the same time, how do they want to buy? From whom? Is it online? Is it through a direct salesperson? You'll need to understand what their preference is, the way they really do want to buy. That, again, also is a customer interview. But then you'll really want to understand, from a business point of view, how those channels work. And that's where you might want to talk to some entrepreneurs who have experience using those marketing channels, using those sales channels that you think you'll be using, that you're hypothesizing that you'll be using. Learning from the experience of others can help you understand everything from the cost structure of the channels to things to watch out for. You can learn a lot by talking to entrepreneurs who've sold using the marketing approaches and the selling approaches that you plan to use. The cost structure of the channel is, of course, also a good discussion to have with the channel partners, because depending on how your channel strategy works for selling, if it's a multi-layer channel, like for example, if you're selling through grocery stores, which might start with a wholesaler, a distributor, a store chain, and then an individual store, there may be a cut at each step in that process. So understanding their pricing assumptions and their discount assumptions, that's an important part of your model also. So that would be wrapped up in your channel discussions. And revenue streams is a similar situation to channels. The question here is, how do customers want to pay? What makes sense? What's acceptable for them as a way to pay for what you're providing? And how much might they pay? Well, clearly, talking to customers is a way to start, to understand exactly what makes sense to them. Does it make sense to them that this is an asset purchase? Or is it a subscription service? Or is it taxing a transaction? You need to be sure that the way that you think you want to charge customers makes sense to them. So certainly, it's part of your customer interview. But at the same time, you might also want to talk to other entrepreneurs who use a similar way of charging customers, a similar revenue stream to what you have in mind. You're likely to learn things that are useful to know about how that revenue stream works. So other entrepreneurs are also a valuable resource. For both your channel discussions and your revenue stream discussions, you'll certainly be talking to entrepreneurs that you don't compete directly with. But you can probably find entrepreneurs that use, again, similar channels and similar revenue streams, but who have a business that really isn't competing directly with yours. Another thing, of course, you'll want to test is your pricing. Is your pricing acceptable? And that is going to come down to a customer question. Is the price acceptable to them? And there are ways of doing that we'll jump into in a separate video. That takes us over to the left part of the canvas, where we start getting into more of the activities and the things that drive cost in your business model. So you've got activities and key resources that you'll need to understand and to utilize for this business. How do you test the hypotheses that you have underlying those parts of your business model? One of the best things to do there is to talk to other entrepreneurs who have a similar business model, who are doing similar activities and using similar key resources, so that you understand how those work. As before, you'll want to talk to entrepreneurs clearly that you're not going to compete directly with. but you're looking for entrepreneurs that are going to rely on similar activities in their business model and similar key resources. Especially if you haven't built a business like this before, you will likely learn a lot by talking to other entrepreneurs who have done it. And in any business, you're going to have partners that you're going to work with. Some of those may reach back to your channel strategy. You could certainly have channel partners both in, say, the marketing part of the business as well as in the sales part of the business. But there are a lot of other potential kinds of partners. You may have R&D partners. You may have manufacturing partners. You'll have various suppliers who are partners. So there are a lot of different kinds of partners, and you need to understand how to work with them, what motivates them to want to work with you, and how their business model works. Those are all key hypotheses you've hopefully put together in your canvas. How do you understand whether or not those hypotheses are right? Number one, as in so many other cases, talk to other entrepreneurs that are working with those partners that you want to work with. As usual, you're going to find some that you're not directly competing with, clearly. You certainly can find people that are working with the same kind of partners that you'll need to work with. Also, you can certainly go talk to the partners themselves about what you're planning on doing and find out directly from them what is their strategy, what do they look for in companies they work with, and how does their business model work? What do they expect from you if you want to partner with them? And finally, that brings us to cost structure. You've made a lot of assumptions about the different types of costs in this business that we talked about in the earlier video of filling out your canvas. How do you go test those hypotheses? One way is to talk to other entrepreneurs who have a business model that looks pretty similar to yours and would have similar cost structure. So, for example, if you're building a software as a service business, it's very likely that your cost structure will look a lot like other software as a service businesses, including, of course, those that you don't compete directly with. Another good resource, though, for testing your cost structure is to talk with contract CFOs, chief financial officers, people who work with a lot of different companies, have seen a lot of different business models, a lot of different financial statements, and they get a very good feel for the cost structure of different models. They can be an excellent source of feedback on your financial assumptions to give you an idea of whether or not those seem credible or if they seem like they need perhaps a little bit of adjusting. So that's a quick walk through testing your business model canvas. It all comes down to talking to people, to maybe getting outside of your comfort zone and getting out of the building and having those discussions. In later videos, we'll talk in more detail about some of the specific parts of the canvas and go into detail as to what these interviews might look like. Be sure and click the subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss out on those. And meanwhile, if this was helpful, please click the like and share it with other entrepreneurs. If you have any questions or comments, please leave that in the comments and click on the playlist below to watch the follow-on videos that we'll be adding on this topic of testing your business model canvas. That's it for now. Thank you for watching.